Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I'm just checking. So you guys are on the first slide. Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next slide. So my name is Claire Diaz Ortiz, and as explained, I really wish I could be there in person, but I cannot. So I appreciate you allowing me to do this via video conference. Today, we're going to spend about 20 minutes talking about the main topic I teach in this book, Twitter for Good. So I lead social innovation at Twitter, and what that means is that I work with organizations and individuals every day who want to use Twitter to make a difference in the world. And that can mean a nonprofit organization in East Africa or a financial planning organization in London. So I want to be clear that this book and my message today really speaks to both charitable endeavors and organizations as well as for-profit enterprises. So next slide. So this is again my book, Twitter for Good, Change the World One Tweet at a Time. And in the book, I go through a 5-step process of how I believe that individuals and organizations can really excel using Twitter. Twitter can be challenging at first, and certainly challenging even when you've used it for many years. And so we're going to be talking about today some of the sort of tactical ways that you can better improve your strategy on it and better succeed with the goals you're seeking for. Next slide. So first, it's important to step back a bit and just talk a little bit about what Twitter is and what Twitter isn't. I know in an audience like this, I'm sure 99% of you are Twitter users and are active Twitter users, so I certainly do not need to explain what Twitter is, but I will point out one thing that I think is pretty important and I think is a commonly held misconception. Many people refer to Twitter as a social network, and I just want to be clear that what I believe and what many others believe is that Twitter is actually a real-time information network. It allows you to connect with people you know in a way that a social network can, but more than that, it allows you to broadcast important news to the world. And to remember that your organization and your company has important news every single day that is worthy of broadcasting. Next slide. So I'd like to step back a bit. This slide shows you an image of an early sketch that Jack Dorsey, one of the co-founders of Twitter, did envisioning what the Twitter service would look like. And the sketch was made in 2006. And as you can see on the sketch, at the time, he had very simple ideas about what Twitter would be used for. You see, it says, I'm in bed, I'm going to the park. Twitter was essentially a way to update your status. And what I like about this sketch and what it shares about the importance of Twitter today is that, honestly, Twitter hasn't changed much. Twitter is an incredibly simple platform, and it works because of that. And what has changed is the innovative ways that users have come up with ways to use the platform. So I want to go into a few examples over the years showing some of the most incredible ways I believe that people have been able to use it. Next slide. So this is an image. You should see an image of a man in a car with a cell phone. This is James Buck, and James Buck is a California blogger, and in 2008, he was in Egypt covering some government protests, and he was arrested for his work there as a blogger covering these protests, and after being arrested, he realized that he still had his cell phone on him. So he was able to send out a tweet. He sent out one word, and it said, "arrested." And then within hours, this mobilized his network back home in California and allowed him to be freed. They contacted the American diplomats, etc. And the next tweet he sent was "freed." Just one word. And I think this was a really early example showing that Twitter could be more than people envisioned and had wider use applications than we had particularly anticipated in the beginning. Next slide. So this is an image of the Haiti earthquake. At least it should be, as long as you're seeing the right slide on the screen. And the Haiti earthquake is an important moment in Twitter's growth and in Twitter's use case history because it showed a moment in which we really saw that Twitter could be used in natural disasters. Up until this point, Twitter had been used in other situations like this and other cases of disaster response. But Haiti was the first really wide-scale use that really told the world this platform, this real-time information platform, can actually help in situations like this, to connect people with resources and to connect people with families, and to essentially prove as a lifeline in situations like this. So let's go to the next slide. And then this final slide I want to point out, these are the government protests in Iran in the summer of 2009, which is right when I started working at Twitter here in San Francisco. And I think this is an important moment to point out in Twitter's history, because this was one of the first times that we understood on a wide scale that Twitter could be used in situations of political unrest. And obviously 2011 with the Arab Spring has seen this extended to a much greater scale. But when we look back, it is really 2009 and these June protests that really changed the face of Twitter's use in political unrest. The next slide. So those are just some examples of the amazing ways that folks, individuals, and organizations have used Twitter along the years. And I want to now go into really the heart of this presentation and the heart of what I teach in the book, which is this tweet model. It's a 5-step process for excelling on Twitter. It works for individuals and for organizations. And I think it will give you some tools to hopefully implement, to take back with you today. Let's go to the next slide. So the tweet model is incredibly simple, but I think that's important. Twitter is an incredibly simple tool, so it's important that any model or framework teaching the use of Twitter should be simple as well. And the tweet framework, or the tweet model, is 5 steps. The first step is target. The second step is write. The third step is engage. The fourth step is explore. And the fifth step is track. And we're going to go through each of these and show how they can really be used for you or for your company or organization. Next slide. So the first step in this is, the first step in this is T, target, which is finding your goal. It's important to remember that you will never get where you're going unless you have a goal. And so when you get on Twitter, it's critical to know what your main goals are and why you think you're there and what you hope to achieve. Now, for many of you in the audience, you've probably been on Twitter a long time, and that's fine. Maybe your strategy is working for you, but if it's not, this is a great time to step back and rethink how you can better implement a more useful strategy that might help you reach your goals. Next slide. So there are 3 main targets or goals that I see practically all of the 100 million active accounts on Twitter using. And I just want to go through what these 3 are, because I think they help you to identify where you fit or where you could potentially fit if you're trying to find a new strategy. The first is an information account. An information account sounds simple, and it is. It's a Twitter account that aims to be an information hub about your area of interest. A personalized account is the second type of account, and this is an account that really aims to show a personal voice to your organization or company. And finally, the third type of account is for nonprofit organizations, called a fundraising account. For for-profit organizations, this is often a direct ask account. This is an account that has one very, very specific purpose, like providing customer service, say, or raising money for a specific campaign. So we're just going to go through what each of these 3 accounts look like, and hopefully you will find yourself in one of these 3, or you will find one of these 3 that you think best applies to your organization. So first I want to point out an information account. Room to Read is a large nonprofit organization that operates in 9 countries around the world, providing literacy and educational scholarship to boys and girls, but particularly to girls. And when we first started working with them in a strategic partnership a few years ago at Twitter, they really decided that they wanted to rethink their Twitter strategy. And when they stepped back and thought about what was best for them, they realized that they wanted to be an information account. This was really their strength. They wanted to be a hub for global literacy. So anytime anyone has questions about global literacy or is interested in reading new articles or seeing new statistics, they know that they can come to the Room to Read account on Twitter. Next slide. In contrast, John Wood, you should see John Wood's 3 tweets on the screen here. John Wood is the CEO of Room to Read. And getting him on Twitter was a bit of a harder process. At first, John Wood really struggled. He said, I travel 2/3 of the year. I'm constantly on the road. I don't think Twitter would be a good fit for me. But in the end, he realized that actually Twitter works incredibly well on the road while on your mobile. And so he realized that it fit best for him as a personal account, a way for him to reach out personally to not only friends and family, but also to donors and to people he was working with in a business sense. He realized that it was much easier often to create personal connections, personal ongoing connections with business partners via Twitter than to send long emails. And so this is one of the ways that John Wood has succeeded at really creating a personal account on Twitter. Next slide. I do want to be clear, though, that a personal account does not have to come from one person. Ushahidi is a nonprofit account. Ushahidi means to bear witness in Kiswahili, and they're an organization that works with crisis mapping. They started in the wake of the Kenyan election violence in December of 2007. And what I like about their old account page here, which you can see on the screen, is that it shows how much of a personal account this organization really chose to be. And one of the simple ways they do that certainly is by even showing the pictures of their team members on their profile page. And that's just a powerful, small way to show that an organization can be a personal account as well. And sometimes that works very well for particularly old organizations that have been around a long time, but want to show a new face to the world. Next slide. This is one of my favorite examples of a personal account. This is the American Red Cross, and the American Red Cross is certainly one of the largest international aid accounts on Twitter and is very successful, and throughout the US is known as being a real leader in social media. And last year there was a particularly bad situation that occurred when one of the American Red Cross employees was using Hootsuite, so a third-party application to monitor various Twitter accounts, and sent a Twitter account that she intended to send from her personal account, but she sent it from the American Red Cross account. And you can see it, it's up on the top left of the screen here. The tweet was, Ryan found 2 more 4-bottle packs of Dogfish Head's Midas Touch beer. When we drink, we do it right, getting slizzard. Now, this was just a nightmare for any business or organization to have sent out a tweet essentially suggesting that, the employees are drinking during work time. This was very bad. But the Red Cross was able to use this to essentially to their advantage. A number of press stories came out about the positive way that they handled this. It was a mistake, and they immediately acknowledged that. You can see in the 2 other tweets here, they say, we've deleted the rogue tweet, but rest assured the Red Cross is sober and we've confiscated the keys. And they really were able to use a personal voice to solve what was a messy situation. And this is still, a year later, being referenced as one of the best use cases of an account being able to really revitalize themselves after a social media accident. Finally, I want to show an example of a fundraising account here. Surfrider Foundation is a nonprofit organization, and what I think is most interesting about this fundraising account that I want to point out is that Surfrider, as opposed to many companies and organizations, they decided that they would allow individual chapters to use their own logos, which is often really not desired. Most companies keep one logo and keep it close to the chest and are very careful to make sure that people don't misuse that trademark. But Surfrider, as you can see on this slide, was actually encouraging individual chapters, individual branches, franchises of their organization to use different logos. And if you talk to them about it, they say, the reason is we found this more effective in terms of fundraising. We found that individual chapters like the autonomy to work on their own. So these are just some interesting examples of the 3 main types of accounts on Twitter. Next slide. So again, this was the target step, and that was about finding really a goal for your organization. So the ones we discussed an information account, a personal account, and then a fundraising or direct ask account. For many for-profits, that's a customer service account. So now I want to get into the second step in the tweet model, which is writing. Next slide. So what's really critical here to remember is that, especially when you're new on Twitter or when you're new to a new strategy on Twitter, it's easy to get tongue-tied. It's easy to not be sure what you want to say and not be sure if your tweets are going to be in line with your new strategy. And in this step, in the second step in the model, the idea here is really just to get going and to let it all out there. Next slide. And I don't think there's anyone better to teach you about how to not over-edit yourself than the rapper Kanye West. If you're not familiar with Kanye West, he is a very, very funny individual on Twitter. He is consistently sending out ridiculous tweets, and he's made a name for himself as a result. And although I think Kanye at times could use a bit more editing, he sets an example in that he allows us to see that we can be more free with how we tweet, especially when we're first finding our legs. So this is the first tweet that Kanye sent. The story behind this was that Kanye West was in Silicon Valley meeting with Ron Conway, a Twitter investor, and Ron Conway was suggesting to him, you know, Kanye, you really should get on Twitter. It's a great way to further connect with your followers and with the public that love you. And so Kanye jumped in Ron's car and he came over to Twitter headquarters and all his employees got to meet him. And then he sent his first tweet, which you can see here, up early in the morning, taking meetings in Silicon Valley. Let's go to the next slide. He immediately realizes the error of his ways and his misspelling and corrects it. LOL, I spelled silicon wrong. I guess I was still thinking about the other type of silicone. It's a process. And this hysterical set of two tweets in the period of just a few minutes was really Kanye's entry onto the platform, and he immediately got tons of press for this. And what people thought was Kanye, like many others, would immediately burn out. You know, it's easy to start something in the beginning and be very excited, but then to die off, and many people who start Twitter are like that. But what we saw over time was that that was not at all what happened to Kanye. And Kanye, in fact, just kept getting better and better. Next slide. These are just some of the slides, some of the tweets I like of his. I don't ever watch dramas on a plane. I don't be wanting to reflect. Next slide. Ha, 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 and 140. He apparently reached his character limit on this one. Next slide. My beautiful, dark, twisted fantasy. Next slide. Mosquitoes suck. And you can see these are all, you can see in the screenshot that these are all retweeted by lots of folks. These were incredibly popular tweets, and ultimately Kanye's strategy, which was to be his ridiculous self, worked well for him, and he has stuck with it more than a year later. Next slide. Another thing that's important to remember, though, about making sure that you're writing and making sure that you're getting out your information in the second step of the tweet model is that it's not just about the written word, it's also about media. So you want to make sure that you're using media, you're using video and pictures as a part of your overall Twitter strategy. And this is an example of an organization, Charity Water, which was the first nonprofit organization on Twitter to reach 1 million followers. And one of the reasons that people attribute to their success is their development of this feature called a photo of the day, which I believe is sent, well, it's sent every day and every day in the afternoon. And it's a powerful photo. Next slide. It's just a powerful, beautiful photo that people can expect and look forward to and get excited to retweet. And since Charity Water did this and had such a success with it, we've seen a number of other organizations and companies follow suit. Most notably, the Gates Foundation now does the same thing. So these are just some ideas on how to best get out your information in the right step and to make sure you're doing it in the written word as well as with media. Next slide. Okay, so now we're back to the main screen. So we've looked at targeting and writing, and now we're going to jump into engaging, which is really the process by which you try to find folks to chat with on Twitter. Next slide. You know, if you're not Kanye West, the world does not come to you at once, and you need to go out there and try to find the folks that you want to chat with and interact with. So Twitter offers tons of functionality to help you do that. And I know most of you in the room are familiar with these, so we will just go through them really quickly, and I'll just make some few points about them as we talk about them. Next slide. The hashtag is obviously a really important tool on Twitter. It helps identify you with a larger group. I'm sure you guys are all using a hashtag today at the conference. And this is just a critical way to help you find other folks with like-minded interests in you and to follow people that are doing the same things you are doing in that day or in that month. Next slide. The important thing, I know you all know what an @reply is, but the important thing to mention about the @reply is the @reply is what really sets Twitter apart from every other social networking or real-time information platform out there. And the reason for that is that the @reply for the first time allows you to technically contact anyone you want in the world. If there is any celebrity or any influence on Twitter, you can connect with them and hopefully they will respond to you. You can't be sure, but it's a new way to really be able to get to know anyone out there, and you don't need to be their friend to do so. Next slide. The question mark is not an official functionality, but I think it's an important one. It's an important one that people can be using more. If you just get on Twitter for the first time, the two best things you can do is help someone or ask a question. So always remember the question mark. Here's an example I want to share of the fact that sometimes you need to remember that your followers, either for your individual account or for your enterprise's account, do not necessarily have all the same knowledge of the tools that you do. So this is an example of the National Wildlife Federation received a query from someone who is not even using the @reply saying, "Dear National Wildlife Federation, I would happily renew my kids' magazine subscriptions if your site worked." And the National Wildlife Federation knows that not all of their followers are particularly adept at Twitter, and so they're out there searching for themselves on Twitter, even when they're not mentioned via @reply, so that they can help when necessary. Next slide. And so their response, they immediately help this person, and then the person tweets out, "National Wildlife Federation magazine resubscribe, success, great magazines for kids." And this is just a small example of how you as an organization should make sure that you're searching for yourself and then reaching out to others to help. Next slide. Finally, I just want to point out that text messaging using Twitter via SMS works in over 70 countries. 40404 is the code in the USA, so it's not relevant for you. But it's a critical way to use Twitter, and it's one of the ways that we're seeing Twitter used most definitely these days. Next slide. And finally, Twitter has a number of promoted products that enterprises and organizations use regularly, and you can find more information about that on twitter.com. These are just ways to help promote the good content you're already creating. Next slide. So we now just have two more steps left, and we're going to get through them pretty quickly. The Explore section is really the idea that you've come up with a goal, you've started sending out your content, and you've started engaging with others. But now it's really time to find new interests and to find new influencers. Next slide. So again, we're searching for yourself, you're searching for interests, and you're searching for influencers. Next slide. So I like this example from Fireside International. Fireside International is a media company, a nonprofit media company based in Haiti, and they were creating an English language school. And when doing so, they realized that they wanted to purchase Rosetta Stone, which is an English language learning material, but it was too expensive for them. They couldn't afford the $18,000. So instead of purchasing it, they sent out a tweet online. And Rosetta Stone, the company, was searching for themselves and was able to find this tweet and ultimately fund Fireside International with the funds they needed, with these free copies of the software that they were able to use in the English language schools. This is just one example of how you can build connections with brands and with potential donors or supporters. Next slide. And finally, here's another example. This is Nick Kristof, the Pulitzer Prize-winning New York Times journalist. And this woman here is Abby Falik. She runs an organization called Global Citizen Year. And Global Citizen Year encourages high school graduates to spend a year in the developing world to get the skills necessary to help them really be global citizens when they then go on to university. And Abby Falik had used Twitter, but had used Twitter for a long time really as a marketing tool and hadn't really seen the value of it until she was able to connect with Nick Kristof. And it was slowly via tweeting each other that they got to know each other. She started retweeting his tweets and then replying him. And finally, he took notice. And now he's become a big supporter of theirs and has written multiple articles about them in the New York Times. And this is just a simple example of how one of the best ways that Twitter works for any enterprise out there is via helping you find influencers. Next slide. And finally, I just want to point out the last step in this, which is about tracking. Next slide. Tracking is about ensuring that you've met your goals and making sure that you're following the metrics to know if you've done so. Next slide. This is an example. Born to Fly is a nonprofit organization that works to stop child trafficking. And on the 9th of September of 2009, they aimed to raise $81,000 for their cause, and they didn't make it. And in the year to follow, they really got their head down and started thinking about what are the things we can do to make this fundraiser more of a success in a year to come. And it was more successful the following year, based on a bunch of different specific ways that they had come up with that they could improve themselves. And I like this example just because it reminds us that following and learning your own metrics is essential. You need to know what you're doing wrong and if you're meeting your goals on Twitter. Next slide. And finally, as a part of the tracking process is also streamlining and simplifying. I think most enterprises can use Twitter for once they have a strategy in place for 20 minutes a day and be doing a good job of really succeeding. And so I hope with these 5 steps, you can be on your way to do that a bit better. Next slide. So remember this model, this is a simple 5-step process. It's just aiming to help you use what is already a simple tool, but to use it better and to hopefully help you reach your goals better. So that's what I'm going to chat about for today. And thank you so much for listening. And I'm happy to entertain any questions right now as well. And thank you so much for having me here. Next slide.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claire. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm going to ask if there's any questions. Sorusu olan var mı arkadaşlar? Ya bir tane soru var. Şimdi bakalım bu soruyu nasıl alacağız? Actually, I'm gonna ask you the question because he doesn't have the mic now. We have a question and asks for when will promoted tweets will be in Turkey?
Hopefully very soon. We're slowly expanding into other countries, so I would hope as soon as possible. That would be my dream. Twitter's still a small company, and we're trying to meet all the demands.
Any more questions? Orada arkada bir soru var arkadaşlar. There is a question in the back. Yeah, one more question, Claire. By the way, it's 7 in the morning in San Francisco, isn't it?
Good morning.
Yeah, very early here.
My question is about tweeting in 2 languages. What do you suggest?
So the main thing I suggest with tweeting in 2 languages is if you have a follower base that responds in either one of the 2 languages, I recommend actually putting it all in one account. So some people say, you should have one account in Spanish and one account in English and create identical content in each. But I don't think that's correct. I think you should assume that all your followers will follow one account. And those of you who can speak Spanish, for example, will follow those tweets, and those in English will follow the English ones. So that's absolutely what I do. I recommend my family to do. My family is all Argentine or Spanish speakers, and that's what they do. And that's what I think works best for organizations.
Any more questions? By the way, Claire, you can see the whole people, I think, now, yeah? Say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Claire, for being with us. Thank you so much.
Yes, absolutely.
Say hi to everyone at Twitter.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon in Turkey.
Absolutely. I can't wait.
Thank
Bye.
you, Dan. Bye.